This podcast discusses themes of mental health, which some people may find emotive, such as suicide or other adult-themed content. The information contained in this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. All views expressed are solely those of individuals involved and do not represent the opinions of any entity whatsoever with which we have been, are now, or will be affiliated. The information is not meant to diagnose or treat any mental health condition. If you're experiencing mental health symptoms, we encourage you to contact a mental health service within your community. If you're experiencing a mental health emergency, please seek the relevant support and interventions by presenting to your local accident and emergency department or contacting the relevant emergency services.
You're listening to the Men's Mental Health Podcast, The Man Hug.
Welcome to The Man Hug, the monthly men's mental health podcast. I'm Dean McShane.
I'm Dan Cooper.
I'm Ian Pearce-Hayes.
And I'm Conleth Kelly.
Each month we will discuss a different topic related to men's mental health, which will include a guest speaker who will discuss their own personal story. And each month we will also be showcasing an organisation or charity within the Merseyside area who work within mental health to help build your signposting skills. Hello, welcome to this month's Man Hug. This month we've chosen the theme of change, and again we've got two fantastic guests. We're going to be joined by George Riley, and a bit later on we have got Debbie Rogers from Sean's Place. Our first guest, George, is an award-winning broadcaster and rugby league commentator who joined the charity State of Mind in 2018, and people will know from last month's podcast we had Ian Knott from State of Mind, so we'll get a little bit more information on that as well. But George, welcome to the Man Hug.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's amazing to have you here. I think, as I said, we had Ian Knott last month from the charity, and I think we got so much positive feedback about what State of Mind do. You know, it's an amazing thing. So we'll touch on that as well. But your own sort of story then. So in terms of getting involved in State of Mind, how do you sort of like describe your story of how that all happened?
It's a strange one, really, because State of Mind, it came into my conscience a long time before I actually started working for the charity, if that makes sense. I was fortunate enough in my career as a broadcaster to be doing very well, and with that comes a high profile. So I was able to use that to give State of Mind some exposure, because mental health and men's mental health had always been a huge passion of mine throughout my own formative years, which I'm sure we'll discuss, and also having a dad who struggled pretty much all of his life, which has been a big part of my life, of course, when that kind of thing goes on in your family as well. So it's always been something I've been acutely aware of and had a real passion for. And I think 2013, something like that, hosted or fronted a kind of mini documentary series for State of Mind, which went on the local BBC, the Inside Out programme, which was on male suicide after a family lost their son in the northeast, and we did a programme about the alarming statistics on male suicide within the rugby league towns, which is frightening when you look into it, and why is it that way, and what more we can do, which kind of comes around to why State of Mind was formed when one of the rugby league's great players, Terry Newton, took his own life, and it sent shockwave through the sport because we didn't really understand why or how that had happened, and what could we therefore do to make sure that there wasn't another Terry Newton. So it was very much in my conscience, and the rich tapestry of life. 4 years after kind of being the voice of this campaign, I was actually needing State of Mind myself, because I fell into a very sudden and very traumatic dark hole in my own life, where had people like State of Mind not been there for me, it might have been, well, we might not have been sitting having this chat in this room. So when I went through that traumatic period of my life in 2017, you find out when you go through trauma a lot about yourself, but a lot about other people around you, and the way State of Mind reached out to me and helped me was just phenomenal. So as soon as I got better and I got through that, I wanted to try and help. You know, the way I see anything in life, certainly going through adversity and, you know, going through the tough stuff in life. If you can't use it in some way to be a positive, then kind of what's the point? So once I got kind of through it and started feeling a little bit more like my old self, one thing I wanted to do was like, well, how, you know, can I do something to talk about where I've been mentally in the last few years to help other people? So that's how I kind of came on board to work with the charity, who, well, you'll have heard from Notty the other week, does tremendous stuff. I don't know the stats to hand, but hundreds of thousands of people we've been able to speak to now within professional sports clubs, Premier League, Rugby Union, Rugby League, which is where we're born, communities, colleges, schools, just going in and reaching out as normal people, because we're not doctors, we're not qualified medical professionals. We're former rugby league players like Ian, not like Danny Sculthorpe, and then people like me who, as you can tell looking at me, has never played rugby league in his life, but has been involved in the sport for a number of years. And I guess it's that human touch and that real life story that we go by, that allows that connection and that shared vulnerability when we open up and say, well, this is me. There might just be one person in a room of a few hundred where just a tiny fraction of something resonates, and it's, if that person is then waiting to talk to you after you've done your presentation, that, you know, that just means everything. That's worth you getting in the car and going over and do it. So to give you a very long first answer,
that's brilliant.
That's kind of how I became to be wearing the State of Mind hoodie.
Well, one of the things you touched on there, George, which is really interesting, because we didn't really mention this with Ian Knott. Obviously, you and Ian have just told us some of the things that State of Mind do, which are great for the community and for rugby. But you said it helped you as well, though.
Yeah.
So what sort of things did you get out of it?
And it still does.
Yeah.
To be honest, talking and having these kind of candid conversations, they're really tough. You know, it's not just, you know, me replying to your message saying, yeah, I'll come and bop on your podcast. You know, it's like, I'll be knackered after I've done this. When I go home and, you know, I'll be shattered. I remember when I first started presenting for State of Mind and telling my story and standing up in front of a room of strangers and sharing your darkest moments. You know, with the hope that it connects and helps somebody. It's really hard. You know, it's all very well for us saying, you know, come on guys, talk. You know, I think everyone knows we need to talk, and one of the keys to mental health is opening up and being honest and talking to each other. But if it was that easy, we'd all be doing it anyway, and it wouldn't need State of Mind to be going in saying you need to talk. So the very fact that, you know, and I struggle with it. You know, I might tell people to do it. It doesn't mean I'm going home and sharing stuff with my partner, because it's a lot more complicated than that. But how it helped me, certainly in the you know, when I started with State of Mind and I first started telling my story of how my life had changed, and I know we're talking about change on this podcast and the kind of things I've gone through and was trying to piece back together. It was like therapy. It was opening my mouth and talking and getting a response and an understanding, and seeing people listening and wanting to help you. That did help me a lot, and it's not so much approval, but it kind of reassures you that, you know, people care, because a lot of the time you forget that, and certainly. And I think a lot of us discovered this through COVID when we're forced to work from home. If you don't get out and see other people and talk to other people, you actually forget that other people care. And it's very easy to become recluse and like within yourself. So that's the importance of connecting with people. So it helps in that way. And just connecting with people. It's so important in terms of how I manage my health day to day now. You know, if I'm not careful, because I work from home a lot, I could not speak to anyone all day. And that's not good. That's really not good for your mental health. So certainly getting out and being able to talk to like-minded people about stuff like this just really helps, just to have it out there, and you feel tired afterwards, but you feel lighter. It's, you know, it's offloading. It doesn't need a solution. I might be having a bad day, and I'll tell you that I'm having a bad day. I don't need you to solve it for me. But the very fact that I've told it to you, I've offloaded it to somebody, so I'm then feeling a little bit lighter about myself. And that's what I would remind a lot of people is you don't need a solution. Just someone listening to your problems does help you on the way. Ultimately, you've got to work them out for yourself. But sharing really, really does help lighten that load.
Yeah, it's really good advice, and I think it's nice to hear how much it's helped you as well. And so what you said, you found it difficult to tell your story, but what have you got back from being able to do that? Do men come over to you and talk afterwards, and you had positive feedback about it all?
Yeah, it's all kinds of different things, and it's funny as well because we present through this job to so many different groups of people. The first State of Mind presentation I ever did was actually with you and your students in your previous job, a big lecture room like 5 years ago. I think it was on World Mental Health Day, wasn't it? Or pretty much thereabout. Yeah. And I don't think I realised at the time how big a deal that was for me, just to open my mouth and start talking. And you've no idea how it's going to go. And certainly with some of the content that I talk about, you've no idea. But after that session, and that was a largely female student audience who were listening, and the amount of those people who came over and said, my brother or my boyfriend went through something similar, or my friend. I was like, okay, so that's good. And then we'll go into a business, and there'll be mainly one. There might be one or two people, and it might sometimes be. Sometimes you find yourself playing that little game. It's like, I wonder if someone is struggling in this room, and I wonder who it is. And sometimes it's not who you think. Yeah. Especially if you go into a business, there might be a big guy with loads of bravado, and then he'll be the one waiting by the door when everyone files out at the end, and it'll be like, can I have a quick word? And I had one of them at a business, and he said just wanted to get stuff off his chest, and it's the real breakthrough. And I go back to what I just said to you. It's like, it's not about fixing people's problems, because you can't do that, especially we as presenters when we're not trained psychologists, we're not mental health clinicians, but we can listen. Yeah, we know how to listen, and we have that empathy because we've been in a dark place. So for someone who you've only met an hour before to trust in you enough to tell them what's going on in there, it's honestly, it really says to you, okay, we're doing a good thing here. Because if we hadn't have come in to do this, he would have been carrying that himself all day. And he only met me an hour ago, and he wants to tell me this. So just little things like that, and the ones where we go into schools and colleges, they really ring true for me when it's a student or so who's struggling and doesn't really know where the help might be, or what to do with it. Might be at an age where you can't really talk to your mates because you don't get it. That's really powerful to me as well, because when I reflect on my formative years, if you like, when I came to university here in this great city of Liverpool, I wasn't right mentally, and I didn't know at the time, and there wasn't anything out there to help me. I tried a few times. I knew there wasn't something quite right with how I was feeling, but I couldn't get any help. Right. And there was certainly nothing like State of Mind or men's mental health groups where you can just go and talk. There was nothing like that. So when I see younger people now having the access to you and being able to have that conversation, I find it really powerful, and it also makes me think, God, that little kid who I was when I went to university, I wish I'd have had this. Yeah.
Well, just wanted to touch again on something that was, really interesting what you said there around people will often come and chat to you afterwards, and maybe it's not the people you expect, or they'll come over and they'll say, oh, I know someone that's experienced that as well. Do you think it's because you're just normalising the conversation? Actually this happens to me, it happens to a lot of people, and it pushes down that barrier then for people to go, God, well, if it's happened to George or it's happened to Ian or anyone like that, then I'll go and tell someone, I'll go and get the help.
Yeah, that's excuse me, that's exactly it. It's normalising it. I think the real power of what the State of Mind guys do, again, with the exception of myself who never played the sport, you're getting big burly, no-nonsense rugby league players having the kind of conversations you would never expect.
Yeah.
Because these are guys who, going back to when they played, the likes of Ian Notton and Danny Sculthorpe, Phil Vivers, and we have a brilliant referee, Ian Smith, who is a fantastic orator. You should speak to him. He's amazing. He'd love to come on, actually, because he's flogging his book at the moment.
We'll get him on.
But that's not what you'd expect to hear from them when they open the mouth, and certainly from the era that we're talking about, where these guys played 10, 15, 20 years ago, even more so now than then, when hopefully with things like State of Mind and with Man Hug and other conversations, I think more people appreciate that it's all right. The whole it's okay not to be okay thing. But these big rugby league players, they're kind of brought up not to show any of that. And I've spoken to a lot of them as well, not only in this job but through podcasts I've done. And, I'll give you one example. Great Britain legend Leon Price, famous player for Bradford Bulls, used to destroy my side Leeds all the time. St Helens, Hull FC, Catalan, like one of the greatest players we've ever produced. And he's been very open in recent years about his mental struggles and his struggles when he came to the end of his career, when that purpose, that focus, and this void suddenly opens up, and where he would normally go to training, he would basically shut the curtains and have a bottle of wine and not know what to do with his life. And then we'll talk about booze, I'm sure, in a little bit, because that's a big part of my journey as well. But I spoke to him about, was it always like that? And he said, well, we were basically trained not to show weakness, and we're trying to get into a professional rugby league team here, and we might be fighting with other people for our place. So if we if we just show any hint that we're not all right, it's like, a lot of footballers or rugby players might play on with an injury and not tell anyone because they don't want to lose the spot. What I found is it can be often the same mentally. You may or may not know that what you're suffering with is stress or anxiety or something like that, but you're certainly not going to tell anyone, because the moment you put that on record, you're giving someone a reason not to pick you. And that was certainly the case in that legendary Bradford Bulls team that Leon played for. There was not a chance he was going to do that, and it's only now that he has the experience of being a middle-aged man and looking back on that he's able to talk about it.
Do you think that's changed now, though, with these sports people who are still playing the sports? I'm taking a break because of my mental health.
100%. I think it has changed. It's not perfect. I'm sure that kind of thing still goes on. Because we're all different. Some people, I'm more than happy to talk to you guys honestly about mental health, but a lot of my mates probably wouldn't come in and do this because they don't want to. But certainly there's been a huge shift. Yeah, absolutely. Clubs have welfare managers, for example, which there was never really any thought of that, and they're assigned to look out, check in on players. I'll use an example from my main job at the moment, working with Oldham Rugby League, where their assistant coach, who's actually just left the club, he was also player welfare manager, and one thing he would do every week was message in the WhatsApp group all the players and ask for a mark out of 10 how they're feeling that week, and he would do that every week and keep track of a trend, and then to make sure he knew who to check in with.
Yeah, because there was that little clip on Sky, I think it was with Paul McGrath, the footballer, and all about whenever he was over in Man United and all the things with him and Alex Ferguson. But every time maybe you go home, one of the Man United team would go with him, one of the coaches, just make sure he got there and went there to pick him up and things like that, because he knew, and he was there keeping an eye, and he did it on his own time. He did it just, he did it for the club as well, but purely for him. And Paul McGrath was, raving about him. Just said, God knows where it would have been if it wasn't for the likes of themselves. But then I also think of the likes of, Owen Farrell, I know rugby union, but what he did for his family, now I'm taking time out. I applauded that thing. Good on you, man.
Yeah, and it's across all sports as well. We've seen it in gymnastics. Simone Biles is a very good example. Tyson Fury's been very open about his mental health issues and substance abuse. Alongside rugby league, I'm a big snooker fan, and so Ronnie O'Sullivan has always fascinated me.
The Dele Alli thing last year as
well.
Dele Alli. I was in tears watching that. That was so brave to sort of sit there and talk about his experience, and what a traumatic childhood he had, and you know, and it makes sense then. People can understand and relate to why he's had so much trouble with his career, and I think there's probably quite a few Premier League footballers who are struggling, but like you say, still even in this day and age won't want to say anything because they're so scared of losing their place. And
yeah, and it's more than that as well. It's not just yes, times and attitudes have changed, so it's all right now, because a lot of the time it isn't, and especially with the advent of social media, you know, you will think a lot about what is the response you going to be, and you've got to be robust enough yourself. You know, a huge reason I, you know, for a while after coming through, you know, my issues and personal trauma, didn't say anything about what I'd gone through was I need to be strong enough to deal with this, because you know you might have a story and you know your truth that you would think most of the world would be on your side with, but social media doesn't work like that, and it's the vocal minority who throw the most hatred and poison on social media. So if you're going to be involved on that, you've got to be prepared for that. You've got to be prepared to read horrible things. You've got to be prepared for people who don't know you, don't know anything about you, don't know your story. They are still going to form opinions, and that's ultimately, rightly or wrongly, down to you to be able to deal with that and realise that, okay, I'll go on Twitter, a third of people are going to like me, a third of people are going to hate me, and most of the people in the middle aren't going to give a shit.
Well, I think it was recently, like Rio Ferdinand, he was talking about the England football team, and he said, what they were at, you were saying, well, you know, they're getting all this grief and all this backlash in social media, and I shouldn't mention his name, but Rio Ferdinand goes, well, that's what they're getting paid for, they're getting the money, so...
Yeah,
and I thought...
That kind of comment really angers me. Really angers me.
Yeah.
You know, when I was at the very top of my career, kind of 2015 through 17, I was presenting on national radio, and I fronted a television show on Channel 5 doing the Football League highlights, and there was no real obvious reason to have anything bad to say about me. I was just some normal bloke from normal shy kid from Leeds who was doing quite well in his career. But just because you're then in the public eye, which again, by the way, is not something I ever wanted. That just comes with being successful in my chosen career, unfortunately. It's not something I ever wanted. It's almost like you get to a certain point and people think it's fair game because they see you or they hear you on the radio or see you on TV. All right, well, I can have a pop at them then. And, oh, well, he's got a good job or he's been paid well enough. It's part of the job. It isn't part of the job. There was nothing in my contract that says you should be able to absorb some of the most vile stuff. You know, people issuing, you know, anonymous death threats and saying things like this. And, you know, this was at a time when everything was good in my life. And I was having to, you know, read this all the time and, oh, that arrogant, smug bastard on the... I was like, you know, you're reading all this crap all the time, and it's like, oh, but it's, you know, just forget about it. It's like, well, that's very easy for you to say. And it's not, you know, the old saying about it's just the fish and chip paper or whatever it was, because it's on the internet. And unless someone physically hits delete, that is then there forever. And worse so in the media, which again I was exposed to, and when people start writing bad stories about you, that's then there forever. You know, if someone wants to search your name, they're going to get these stories. So that's just, oh, it doesn't matter. Just, it's not part of the job, and it's not okay. Unless they're going to then, these people are going to come and look after you and help you with the mental health impacts of this kind of thing.
Because you think of young people as well with social media, you know, there's still that element, like, you know, Dan, you were saying today, like, you know, going over those kids with the schools. You know, I'm sure there's that element, you know, we're talking about football and things, the sidelines and, you know, the abuse sometimes the players on the pitch, just kids, like, you know, are getting from the sidelines. So I know it's a different level, but it's still just, you know, it correlates to all of this.
Yeah, I've just finished a podcast series for State of Mind with referees, with Super League match officials who don't have a voice, by the way. And it took a lot of hard work to gain their trust to come on and speak to me on a short series of podcasts. But I'm so glad they did. It was just a half a dozen series of, you know, the top referees in Super League, shining a light on the kind of abuse that they get. And again, it's part of the job. And the thing you get most from people, and again, it was quite on the whole, very, very positively received this series. But you can imagine some of the comments when we posted the clips and stuff online. It was, well, if they don't want abuse, then they shouldn't be bent. Or they should be better at the job if they don't want to be abused. Or they're not accountable for the decisions. That's why fans get annoyed. It's like accountability and abuse are very, very different things. It's like you might disagree with the referee's decision, probably because it's gone against your team.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you can jump on the internet and type absolute poison against a guy you would never ever say that to you if you met them in the street. And a lot of these referees are active on Twitter and it's their choice. And so it was fascinating getting into that and how they deal with. And again, that's it's part of the job. It's not part of the job. Who decided that is part of a job description? It's just it's really sad. And it's not sport. It's just a sad reflection on culture and where we are as a society. That you've got to be very, very robust to open that specific app, because it's not going to be nice most of the time.
Well, one of the things, George, that you've been really proactive with on your social media is is your abstinence story. Really, how you spoke, how you used alcohol in a wrong way, and it affected your mental health. And then, we've been following your abstinence story since 2019, is it now? And
yeah, so my last pint was New Year's Eve 2019. I didn't know at the time that was going to be it. Yeah. But kind of life carried on opening up from New Year's Day, 2020. And I see it as a pay-as-you-go sobriety deal that I haven't signed up to, but I'm quite enjoying at the moment.
Brilliant. So when was it? What was the light bulb moment where you thought, I need to make a change here? And
yeah. There's no simple way to answer that, really. It's been a big part of the mental health journey that I've been on since 2017. Has been to examine my own relationship with alcohol. So I guess the easiest way to get into that, before I talk properly about what I found about going sober and what I found about myself, is kind of to summarise where I was in 2017 and then where I fell and what prompted this kind of, it's the biggest change I've made in my life. But my career was flying in 2017, and it was the year that we're looking to settle down. Me and my partner bought our first home in the summer of 2017. At the start of the year, we'd had that plan to settle down. And I had two great jobs which I was juggling, Monday to Friday, doing a national radio show on 5 Live, and then at the weekend I was down in London doing the Football League show on the telly. So I was very busy, but my profile was very high. Things were really successful, and being a tight Yorkshireman, I never spent any of the money I earned. So my partner was like, "Let's buy a house." So that was kind of the plan for a year. But the way the year panned out, I couldn't just never have anticipated. And when I talk a lot about adversity and dealing with adversity, a lot of the time you just don't know what's around the corner, which is why it's so important not only to look after our mental health when we're struggling, but to look after it ongoing, to keep it, to keep our mental health as positive as we can, so that we can deal with adversity and setbacks when they come, because otherwise we could fall very quickly into a dark hole, which is what happened to me. Literally 2 weeks, we moved into our house in June. 2 weeks later, I lost the TV job, which it was just one of those things, a bit like in professional sport when a new head coach comes in. He might have a favourite scrum half and he'll bring him in, which is no disrespect to the current scrum half, but it's just like, I prefer this guy, so suddenly this guy's out. And this is what happened. The TV show got a new head of sport and he wanted someone else presenting it. And it was a massive ego bruise, because I loved that job and I was 2 years into a 3-year contract, and I was really looking forward to the final year, and also financially it was quite well, that was the reason I was able to get the house, basically, because it was quite well paid and it was quite financially weighted into the final year as well. So that took we just bought this house, and then 2 weeks later, the contract that I thought was going to be supporting us with the house move suddenly had disappeared, and the way it was handled was awful as well. I basically got told in a voicemail on my birthday that you're not coming back, and that was tough. And I dealt with that not very well, in the way that a lot of men deal with shit stuff. I just started drinking a lot, quite heavily. And I look back now, and I realise that was the wrong thing to do. But I got through that. It was a tricky period. Straight after this, what was supposed to be this new positive chapter in my life, that happened. But I still had most of my work still going strong. And then fast forward to October 2017, and something that I could never ever have anticipated would happen, when I got a phone call late at night, almost to this day, 7 years ago. It's the last Thursday in October in 2017. And it was at the time of something called the Me Too movement, which I'm sure you'll recall, where a host of high-profile males were being brought into the news, basically, and accused of various improprieties. Now, I never would have thought that anything like that would go anywhere near me, because I'm a man of very good character, a very loyal guy, and that's just not me at all. And here I was, I got this phone call late at night from my boss saying we'd had some complaints made about you, and I just didn't have a clue what was going on. And without going into the specifics of what ended up being an absolutely tortuous few months of my life, I was told by my employer that I would be supported through a kind of short process to find out what was going on and discuss it and find an outcome. And the next day, when I was awaiting a phone call from my employers, I answered the phone, and instead it was a journalist saying, I'm about to destroy your life. And I can remember that. We'd had a sleepless night. I'd been sat up with my partner trying to work out what on earth was going on. Obviously, she wanted to know because her partner was being accused of behaving inappropriately at some point. I didn't have a clue what was going on. And the next morning, when I answered the phone, hoping it was someone telling me what was going on, it was actually a journalist who somehow had a story that I hadn't even been told to. And then that weekend, it played out through the national press. Again, I'd not been told anything, and my face and completely sensational, inaccurate stories were splashed across all the tabloids. And I'd gone within 24 hours of presenting a national radio show to sitting on my doorstep, waiting for the next vehicle to dive in front of. I was absolutely petrified. I didn't know what was going on, and there was absolutely no one helping or supporting me, other than my partner and my family. That vicious news cycle lasted a few days. I was then kind of at home on suspension, waiting to find out what had gone on. It took a full 8 days for my employer to come to me with some information, and then when it came, I was like, okay, we can deal with this. It was nothing like anything that was reported, but what then happened was a 7-8 month legal fight of me trying to get the information I needed to go in and clear my name, and my employer not even telling me the identities of people who were saying things about me. It was just this completely anonymous thing that I couldn't get to the bottom of, and the damage had been done because it was in the press. And I can't tell you how bad my mental health became in that period. The shock of it, first of all, like what on earth is going on, and then the diving deep into yourself is like, well, what part have I actually played in this? What do I need to fix within myself? And then what on earth is the outcome going to be? Like, how do we fix this? How do I get out of it? And I was locked in this tortuous 7-8 month fight where the first few weeks were trying to trying to stay alive, if I'm honest. A lot of people talk to me when I talk to them about it now, saying, "Wow, you must be so strong and so resilient to have got through that period." It's like, I don't see it that way. I can't tell you how I got through it. I got through it, I think, because of there must be something in me, but I got through it because of the strength of other people, the strength of my partner, my mum and dad who moved in when this was all kicking off, and my doctor who went above and beyond and put me on the right medication at the time to make sure that mentally I didn't give up, which is everything was telling me, just, you're done. Because I didn't know what was going on, but what I did know, having spent my entire life in this industry, was, well, regardless of what the truth is here, you're screwed here, because that's just the way the industry works, unfortunately. And I was just absolutely petrified of A, trying to find out what was going on, but B, I was like, well, I don't know what life looks like if I don't have this, because my career was my everything. I just absolutely sacrificed and dedicated everything to it, and suddenly it was like, oh my God, I thought I'd lost everything. My mind at the time, I thought I'd lost everything. And the way I was mentally at the time, what I had left, I thought, well, I don't want that. It was like, everything I want in life is gone, which looking back is bollocks. Because what I had was an amazing partner, an amazing family, a core group of friends who were diving in front of buses for me, wanted to do anything for you, and you only find that when you go through adversity. So all the things that are genuinely important in life, I had, but all I could see was what I'd lost. And it took me a while to work that out. So the medication really got me through. The medication and the support of others, until I got to a strong position where months and months later, I took the decision to walk away. I thought that this isn't getting resolved, this situation. I'm not going back to work there anyway. So I quit, set about getting my mental health back right, and tried to work out what the rest of the life was going to look like. And then, a few months after that, started doing this work now. But to go back to your original point about alcohol, that was, in my recovery, probably the key part of my recovery was identifying that alcohol has never served me right. I go back to what I mentioned at the top when I came to university, and I was suffering what I didn't realise was depression, anxiety, and I dealt with that as a student by getting drunk every night. Now, obviously, I now know that was like pouring petrol on a fire and expecting it to go out, and that's why I struggled for as long as I did. But yet, here I was in my adult life, dealing with this trauma, doing exactly the same thing. I couldn't deal with the reality of what was happening and what had happened to me. The trauma of it, the shame of it, the impact on my partner, my family, and me, what the rest of life was going to look like. I just couldn't deal with it all. So I was again blocking it out with booze. I was doing the right things, like going to trauma counselling. I was very fortunate, by the way, when I needed help, that through my contacts with rugby, they were able to get me some trauma counselling from Sporting Chance, where my employer gave me no help when my partner was begging them to help me. So I saw an amazing trauma counsellor, but even I was doing things like I was going to therapy and then going to the pub outside her house and having 4 pints after. I was like, what are you doing? It's like, okay, you're dipping your toe into getting better here, and then you're going and doing that. And it took me a while. We're talking till the end of, I left my job middle of 2018. We're talking a year or so later when I started thinking, right, okay, how do I properly get better? I'm a lot better than I was. I'm starting to operate as a human being again, where I've been in this hole where other people are making decisions for me and trying to prop me up. Ultimately, I've got to be strong enough to, no one can help me other than myself. And it was only when I identified the booze issue that I started doing that, realising that it, through most of my life, being a kind of, I describe it as a pretend best friend. Someone who was too shy really to talk about the problems. I would just go and have a few pints and then everything would disappear, because it does. That first 2 or 3 pints, it buries it. It doesn't go away. It's still there the next morning, raging at you. But that was all right for me. That was my way of dealing with it. And it was only the last few years and through the trauma of what happened that I was actually able to recognise, look, I've got to tackle this because I'm going to be carrying so much weight through the rest of my life if I don't. I remember waking up New Year's Day 2020 after a party at our friend's house. I just stared in the mirror. I just thought, I can't do this anymore. You know, sometimes you have those days, I just can't do this anymore. I was probably 1.5 stone, 2 stone overweight. My beard was even worse than it is now. You know, I looked an absolute mess.
His beard looked great, by the way.
I'm just staring in the mirror, and I didn't actually recognise the guy who I was looking at. So I just thought, right, okay, what do we do about this? Dry January. My partner always does dry January most years. I never really saw the point. I was like, well, if you're just going to get back on it, then why deny yourself the pleasure in January? That was always my attitude. Unless I was training for a marathon or something like that, I was like, well, what is the point? But I thought, you know what, I'll do it. And come the end of January, you know, she cracked the wine back open, and I just said, look, I'm going to keep going here because I'm feeling a kind of clarity that I haven't felt since this happened.
Really?
My mind feels a bit lighter. I feel like I can cope with something. Like if anything bad happens now, I feel like I can cope with it. Whereas I had a couple of years, I can't cope. I just can't cope with anything. Can't make decisions for myself. I can't do anything. So I'm just going to keep going. And then, as you know, January became February, became March. You notice other things. You lose weight. Your skin improves, and that was always, you know, looking back to my university anxiety. Bad skin was a big trigger in that. I was suddenly looking good again. I was sleeping better. I stopped snoring. I was getting fitter. I was like, you know what? This might be all right, this. And I just kept going. And I got addicted then to my progress. You know, I use an app and you chart your progress, how many days, how much money you've saved, how many calories you've saved. And I got addicted to that. So January became February, March, April. And at the time, again, it wasn't forever. I was training for a marathon that spring, but then with COVID, it got cancelled and then it got moved. It was the Manchester Marathon 2020, got moved to the October. So I thought, all right, well, there's no point getting back on the booze before then. I'll keep going. And then once you get to month 9 or 10, you think, well, I might as well do the year here. So then dry January became a year. And I was like, well, I've got no real reason. Why would I just decide now to get back on the beer? It's like the improvements have been so good for me. I wasn't working, so that was a big thing, the money you save. But just the health benefits. I was like, oh my God, I'm feeling emotions of happiness. I hadn't felt any of this. It was getting through the day every day. That was my main focus since the trauma.
Yeah.
Since the event. It was getting through every day, waking up, how am I getting through today? Mentally, how am I dealing with the anxiety and depression I have? How do I get through the day? Suddenly I felt I can do it. I was making plans, like stuff that, okay, wow, you know what, it's going to be all right. I don't know what life looks like here, but I know I'm on the right path again now because I'm looking after myself, and that's going to allow me to make decisions. And, you know, it's like that Charlie Maxey cartoon where it's like, you know, him and they're looking at the forest, the little boy and the mole or the horse or whatever, the pony, whatever it is. And he's saying, I can't see a way through, but can you see your next step? Yes, we'll just take that. And it was that. It's like, okay, what do I need to do today? What do I need to do this week? I know that step. And then once you take that step forward, suddenly the view is different. So then you can see around the corner and you can start. So that was my approach then. And I'm now, coming up to 5 years sober, and I'm very wary of not being the alcohol police because it's all about your own relationship with alcohol. You know, all my friends and family like a drink, and you know what, that's fine. But it's about having that honest chat with yourself. What's my relationship with alcohol? Does it serve me? Mine didn't. And you're right, I post about it a lot. I've charted the journey as best I can on my Instagram, and a lot of, you know, the response has been great, but a lot of it is, I didn't realise George was an alcoholic, or I didn't realise George had a drinking problem. I was never an alcoholic. There were a variety of different drinking problems. You know, I've run 9 marathons over the last few years. You don't get many alcoholic marathon runners. But was my relationship with alcohol good? No, it was absolutely appalling. I used alcohol for bad reasons, to block stuff out, to deal with shit, not to enhance a night out. I would drink on my own mainly, or if I went out, I've always suffered with social anxiety, so if it was a work do, I would have to get blind drunk, which again was half the problem. Going back to what happened, that was my way of coping with situations I was uncomfortable in. So that now doesn't happen. It's a completely different way of life. You know, you have to think a bit about. I don't not go out, but it's always on my terms. You know, and I make sure I leave when I want to leave, and you know, I drink non-alcohol-free beers, which there's some great ones, and it's just a different lifestyle. And a lifestyle I just wish I'd have recognised a lot earlier, because I really like the person I've become the last few years. I don't think I was ever a bad person, but I think going through heavy stuff brings out your own empathy with other people. But certainly the fact that I'm now always sober means I'm present and I'm engaged in everything that people, you know, my circle are going through. I know what they're doing all the time. If they need me, I can be on hand. Can you take me there? Can you take me there? Yes, I can. I can, you know, I'm there. I'm now that friend. If someone's going through shit, they might ring me, top of their list. I was never that, because I was always too caught up in my career, my cool job in the spotlight, my telly job, my radio job. George would be too busy. No, George will help, or he'll know what the right thing to say or the right thing to do. So that's been the biggest thing. It's really being honest with myself about my relationship with alcohol, and that's it's been really, really interesting, and the way it's opened up my mind, and I kind of I reevaluate my entire life. I look back on it, I was like, okay, I wasn't right there. At university, I had depression, anxiety. Never realised that. I can see it now. I can see I was struggling. It's been fascinating from a very, very dark period, which was, I almost felt like I died and I was still alive, if that makes sense. It kind of like, that George has disappeared, but he's kind of living, he's watching his own funeral and watching his own wake, this bizarre existence where life carries on without you, because that version of me had gone. You know, Georgie Boy, the radio TV presenter, had just disappeared in a pretty horrible way. But George was still there, living and trying to find, okay, what's next? And I guess the challenge has been when you see, or how it felt, life going up in smoke and career going like that. It might have felt like, okay, life's over in your 40s, and it's not. But I've got to now build another one, and that's been the challenge. Rather than just accepting, okay, this was shit. That was really, really horrible, and I've got nothing to look forward to anymore. It's like, well, okay, priorities change. Life may completely change, but you're still here to live it. And, you know, at those lowest moments, I might not have been. You know, there were a number of times where I might not have been. So, it's, you know, I'm forever grateful that I got through that period to at least find out what the rest of life looks like.
Definitely, it's so important, and I just, you know, so blown away by your own sort of personal reflection on things that, you know, you've been able to use to look at what was useful, what wasn't useful, and as you say, you know, identifying times when you weren't well, you know, in university and things like that. It's such an important thing that a lot of people can learn. And as you say, you know, removing alcohol, it might not be for everyone, but you know it's worked for you, and that's so important, you know, and it's helped you get on to the next good things with your life. You mentioned it in particular, sort of like marathon running as well, and how impactful has that been for your mental health then and your well-being?
Yeah, fantastic. I've always been active. You know, my dream. My dream, I shouldn't say this in a room full of blokes in Liverpool, but my dream was to play for Leeds United. That was...
Yeah! Oh, no. God, Conliffe's finally got a friend. I'm leaving. I'm going.
That was... As a lad, that was the only thing I wanted to do.
That's still Conliffe's dream.
Never give up. And, yeah, that's probably why I've kind of ended up having a career in sports media, which was completely unplanned. It's like I said, as a kid, I wanted to play for Leeds. That dream ended. I had a good crack at it. Excuse me, I played schoolboy with Leeds till I was 15, and then I never grew. So that was never going to happen. But, you know, I went and did something completely different and studied French at Liverpool Uni. So how I went from that into sports media was just a complete chance. I just got a job at a football website, and then found my way from there. But yeah, I still play. I'm 46. I still play Sunday League, and then during the week as well. But the running, the impact of running, long distance running on mental health was again another thing I wish I'd have discovered earlier on in my life. I'm in a position now where mentally I'm okay. I still suffer depression and anxiety. I was actually diagnosed officially earlier this year with PTSD from what happened, which I never really needed or sought that diagnosis, but I was getting so frustrated every time I got these bad spells of anxiety and depression. My doctor's view was if I had the label, then I would understand why it was happening and get less frustrated with myself when it was. That was why we went down that route. And even again, it's not something I like shouting about because you have a very, I think most people have a notion of what PTSD is, and that's, I feel a little bit embarrassed that that's what I've got. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I've not been in a war, I'm not a policeman, but I've gone through something absolutely shocking that I could have never anticipated happening.
Well, that's it, isn't it? It's trauma in any sense. It's trauma.
And every time, it's all from that phone call from that journalist. I can remember where I was. I can remember what I was looking at, and I can remember how I felt, and I can remember sinking to my knees, and I can remember opening the door and wanting to sprint out and die in front of a car. And it's little things like I can't answer phone numbers I don't know. If I'm not expecting a message or an email, I get this trauma response. And just that little trigger then can send me into a cycle of negative thinking, which is what my anxiety and my depression breeds off. I've got this really good understanding of how my own brain works now, so I can kind of see it happening. But going back to the exercise point, I in the summer of 2019, I took the decision I didn't want to be on medication anymore. Again, I'm not anti-medication for mental health because it saved my life.
Yeah,
I was on a lot. The end of 2017, it was probably keeping me here. I was on anti-anxieties, antidepressants, diazepam and sleeping pills, and I was drinking. So I wasn't in a really great space, but I don't think I could have done or got through that without help. But I got to a point a couple of years later. It's like I felt like I need to feel emotions, even if they're hard. I need to understand what's going on in my head. So I gradually came off everything. But the way I was able to do that was because my antidepressant was exercise. So it wasn't going cold turkey. It was like, right, well, I get that buzz, I get that dopamine hit every time I go and run 10 miles or I play football. Yeah. So as long as I'm doing that, I think I can probably do this without medication. I've had a few tough chats with my doctor in the last couple of years when I've had bad spells. He's like, if you need to be on medication, George, if you were a new patient coming to me, I would be prescribing you this. But because he came through the storm with me, he knows me, and he's like, I trust your judgment. And each time I've almost got the prescription and then never used it. That's kind of the path, that I'm rowing, or the route I'm going. But yeah, the running, it is like a drug. It is like a positive mood drug. And again, it doesn't work. I would, much like not being the alcohol police, I would never say to anyone in this room, go and run 10 miles, you'll feel a lot better tomorrow. You might not. I know it works for me. I took my partner to the St Helens 10K a few years ago, thinking she'll get the running bug out of this. She's never run since. It hammered it down. She absolutely hated it. I waited for her to come over the line, thinking, she's going to say thanks so much. That was the best day of my life. She didn't speak to me for an hour. So it's like, it's finding out what works for you. I know I can get that buzz, and also focus. Having that thing in the diary each year. Hopefully, I've not run the last 2 years because I snapped my ankle last year. But it's having that thing, right? I know I'm running a marathon in April, May. So I know pretty much from Christmas I've got to be doing this.
Yeah.
So it's to give you that routine, which again, something when you're struggling with your mental health, you need that. It's like I write myself a to-do list every morning, even if I'm really struggling, even if the to-do list says bins, car wash, something like that, because then I can physically tick them off. I can feel some worth, and that helps me get through. And it's the same physical thing with running. So yeah, I'm stuck on 9 I've done 9 marathons at the moment. I really want to hit double figures.
Yeah.
But
It's
I'm a bit stuck.
It's interesting you say that, because I still run. I know it doesn't show, but I used to do a lot of long distance running. But for me, it was self-harm. That's what it was for me, because I had a very, very stressful job, and that's how I cope with it. Better than hitting a bottle, better than doing lots of things, whatever. And there's a fellow on our road, he tries to get me out long distance running. I always remember years ago, and he's a mental health nurse, and he goes, "No, I've got no more demons." And he just went, "Yeah, I know what you mean." You know, it's that kind of thing. So I still run. You know, I still did a race at the weekend. But yeah, and it's finding what's right for you. And
I've never felt that kind of self-harm. I want to hurt myself here, but I've heard that before. I lost a good friend of mine called Steve Prescott, who was a famous rugby league player who died in 2013, and his brother Neil, who's a lovely guy, he runs triathlons, and he properly beasts himself, and he's confided in me. So look, my little brother went through so much pain. It's almost like I want to feel that pain when I run. And Kevin Sinfield said something similar about Rob Burrow with all the stuff he's doing. It's like what he must have gone through. And you know, Rob was a very good friend of mine as well. So that's been tough this year.
Because it's having those conversations. Because a friend of mine, he's gone through trauma with one of his kids or whatever, and for him it's long distance cycling.
Right.
And I did speak to him, and he goes, "Well, yeah," and he did know it. And he says, "But it's better than doing this and doing that." I thought, yeah, just as long as you're aware, you know, that's the important thing. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. The cycling one's interesting because in that year, that transitional year of 2019, where I gave up alcohol at the end of it, one big thing I did, which was kind of probably, if I look back, the start of my recovery, was a long distance charity cycle. I've never cycled in my life, and this was again for the Steve Prescott Foundation. And one thing Steve did when he was alive, and he did all this when he was terminally ill, was like a 900-mile cycle. Basically, they flew to Barcelona and cycled back to London from the Catalan Dragons rugby stadium in Perpignan. And then rowed up the Thames in a dragon boat for 27 miles or something. And then the last 30 miles, they ran a half marathon into Wembley Stadium for the Challenge Cup final and delivered the match ball. Yeah. So 2019 was the 10-year anniversary of that. So Steve's son, he's got 2 sons, Taylor and Kobe. Taylor was at an age in 2019 where he basically said, "I want to do what Dad did on the 10-year anniversary." So they basically put a team back together, and I got persuaded to go and do it. I didn't even have a bike, so I borrowed a mate's bike, did a couple of trains. I cycled actually from Manchester over here to Liverpool. That was one of my cycling training runs. And then we got dumped in Perpignan, cycled basically 900 odd mile, and we did it in August as well, so you can imagine what the temperature was like. Jeez. First 3 days through the Pyrenees, oh my god. And then got back. Then the last day of cycling was Dover to Windsor Castle, which was 120 miles. That was the hardest of the lot. And then the 27 mile in a dragon boat and the 13 mile run into Wembley Stadium. But at that time in my life where I'd been mentally on the floor, to achieve something like that and to achieve it as a group of people where you're looking out for each other, that was something I needed at that time so much, where I'd felt cast aside by the world, and suddenly there was this group looking out for each other, and it taught me so much, that trip, about what you can achieve as a group with the right people around you, you know, having that trusted circle, because every day of that cycle there was someone really struggling at the back. I mean, it was pretty much me every day. But did we all get through to the end? That's because we all looked out for each other.
That's how, if you can get through that, you can get through anything. It scares me just thinking about that. Unbelievable.
But the thinking time as well. Same with the long runs. You know, I can go out running with a problem, and I'll have a good idea by the time I get back of what I'm going to do about it.
Yeah.
But also, without getting too deep, that cycle, the first few days when you're cycling up these mountains in the Pyrenees, and they're so high you can't see the bloody top of these things. You're cycling so slow that all you want to do is get off the bike. Like, you can't even see you're making progress, but you are. And there's something in you. It's that battle where you just, everything's telling you to stop, but you know you've just got to keep going, even though you're going so slow. And that really struck me. You know, it's a bit of a cheesy metaphor, but it struck me about being about life and about being how you confront adversity, because you might not be able to see the top of this mountain that you're climbing. You might be in so much pain that you don't feel you're moving forward. But the moment you take that decision to get off the bike, which I was in such a dark place a few times that I might have done, you're not getting back on, because you're not getting that momentum back when you're on this hill on the bike. You're done. As soon as you get off the bike, that's it. So it's finding a way just to keep going as slowly as possible, with faith, because of the way that life is, that there's no such mountain without a summit, and you will eventually get to the top of it. And then when you do, as however long it takes, whether you can see the way up or not, you get to the top, and the view is amazing. And then you have that great bit where you freewheel down, and that kind of, you know, it's cheesy, but that's kind of how life is to me. It's like staying on the bike, isn't it? Staying on the bike, trusting that this will work out somehow. I've no idea how. Yeah, I'm in a lot of pain, but we'll get it. We'll get this, because the moment I hop off, that's it. And I know I don't want to do that.
I think it's an incredible metaphor to finish on. Really, Joy. I think it's absolutely perfect, everything we've been talking about. But thank you so much for telling your story. It's it's never easy for any men that come onto the podcast to do it, but we can't thank you enough for doing it. You know, it's something that is very inspirational. I'm sure it'll help a lot of people, but it's also really incredible to hear how, you know, you've made positive changes, and you know you now getting on with your life, and things, as you said before, you know, haven't been this good. You know, it's really amazing for us to hear as well. I suppose one last thing, because I know if I bump into Dr. Phil Cooper, he'll kick me in the shins. A final plug for State of Mind, and so if anyone's listening and they want to get involved, what's the methods people need to take for State of Mind?
Yeah, excuse me. Best way, you can either find us on our social media channels or on our website, and you can make requests through that, or you know, you can find us direct, either the presenters or Phil Cooper, who is our great leader who's overseeing it. But if you think your sports team, your school year, your university, your college, your business, anything could benefit from a mental health presentation, it's basically what we do is an hour really. You know, there are a few slides. There's a very basic PowerPoint. We don't like to be too educational, but it's effectively two presenters talking like we've just spoken today, sharing our stories, sharing our tips, letting you know that, look, you're not on your own here. We'll listen to you. We'll try and help you as best we can. And it's one person helped is a job well done, which is why we keep doing what we're doing. Yeah,
we'll keep doing it. It's an amazing charity, and we're going to keep singing its praises and keep promoting it. But thanks for doing what you do with State of Mind and everyone, George. But once again, thanks so much for joining us on the Man Hug. We massively appreciate it.
No, I appreciate the invite, and never need an excuse to come back to Liverpool. Yeah. So thank you very much for getting me back over here.
Oh, amazing. Thanks so much, George.
You're listening to the Men's Mental Health Podcast, The Man Hug.
Okay, so it's that part of the podcast now where us, the hosts, we talk about the theme, and this month we have gone for the theme of changes. We all experience change. Changes are natural, and it can be a negative or a positive. So when things change in your life, it can impact on your mental health. You may feel out of control in situations that you didn't expect. So when good or bad change happens in your life, you'll need to make an adjustment. Using healthy adjustment methods will help prevent negative effects on your mental health. Your outlook on the world affects how you deal with new situations. So if you generally have a negative outlook on life, major changes may worsen those feelings. Negative thoughts and feelings can lead to greater levels of stress, as we know. But even positive change can be upsetting to us. This is because a once comfortable way of life will soon look different. So you're put out of your usual comfort zone, which makes it harder to deal with change. So when stress becomes overwhelming, it can damage our mental health. Unhealthy coping mechanisms and a negative mindset can make dealing with change feel pretty much impossible. Stress is caused by change, and it can have many physical and mental effects that can impact on our overall well-being. Now, there's something called uncertainty bias, and it impacts on how you deal with change. So when a major life change happens, your brain automatically sees this as negative. This can influence your decision-making process, and it can increase those horrible feelings of anxiety and depression. Learning the right techniques to deal with new or unexpected situations will only benefit your mental health. And I go back to what we always say on the Man Hug: get help. Talk it through with someone. Seek the right support, because together we are stronger, and support through a change process can really be beneficial. I think the important thing is to acknowledge that we are all unique individuals, and change can affect us all differently. I think we all learned a lot about ourselves during COVID and lockdown situations when our lives all changed overnight. Conworth?
Yeah, totally agree with everything you said. And it is looking at those idea of changes, but also what is available to you, making those life choices. Because one life choice that none of us actually made was our decision to be born. It's just like, boom, there you go. That's it. Here's your, get on with it, those kind of things. Thankfully, I'm very pleased that I'm here, and as I'm sure all the listeners are. But shut up, Ian. But the thing is, it's just like, it is that also looking at the environment that you're actually within as well. What influence you can actually have to actually make those changes with it. The terrible things we've been seeing in the world at the minute. Some children obviously being born within war-torn countries, all the things actually going there. And I actually got quite upset there. It was the other morning I was watching something, and it just hit home. And a lot of stuff was children over in Palestine. No, it was in Palestine. Actually over there, and they were playing games, and the games they were playing was ambulance, picking up the dead people, stopping the blood and things, I guess, whatever. It reminded me back of whenever back in Ireland, some of the games we used to play were checkpoint, ambush, ambulance, things like that. And, we pretend to drive and being asked for ID and things like this. And sometimes, how you're socialised is just what you actually have within your environment. And for me, one of the things that actually helped me change that in my role was just the fact that I had the support there. I had family there to say, there's other things out here. And so the things I actually did. So, it's that kind of thing actually maybe, as I said in one of the last podcasts, is maybe just trying to maybe surround yourself with people with similar attitudes, positive attitudes, actually thinking of those things, actually being able to move on and trying to make those changes. I relate back to whenever, 16, growing up in the mid-80s in Northern Ireland, wasn't the best. 16, moved over to London. I picked up, moved over there, got job, work, things like that. And whenever I actually then went back home, one of the good things is my parents, they encouraged me to play in a band and things like this, whatever. And we'll go to Tullygunnigan, we'll go up to there and rehearse and things like this. We're absolutely rubbish, we're cack. But we weren't hanging around street corners and things like this, whatever. So that's another good thing. And we were all the lads together. It was that camaraderie that we actually had. So the idea of it is just like, I know I had avenues, things like that, and people saying, well, you were lucky you had that. But there is support actually out there, and it's being able to actually find it and actually see where it is and being signposted. So we could, at the end of this podcast, you'll have Jake Mills coming back on talking about the Hub of Hope, just showing what's actually out there, things for certain people. So it's knowing where it is, what to do, and relate to other agencies like, what we've actually come in, those people we've actually had come in, actually promoting their things. But the other thing as well, one thing for myself in particular is doing reflections, looking at back, what actually happened in my life and what, it's that sliding doors moment as we talked about before, actually just thinking, okay, where am I, why am I here? Through one of the things for me in particular that's really helped with this is doing the level 8 studies, doing things up to the doctorate levels. And it's that self-reflection, why am I here? The philosopher Kierkegaard actually says we're our ultimate being just before we die, because of all these things actually do affect us as we grow older and makes us who we are today. So once again, having that self-reflection, okay, well, I won't go down that route again, I won't do those things. As Kierkegaard always says, life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. So, having to think of those things as well. Having others actually share, support, actually have no shared experience, which you're actually doing for the podcast. One thing I've actually been following for years, I don't know if anybody else in this room's actually done it. Has anybody heard of Post Secret? Post Secret, it's an online forum. It's a blog. It's been going since, I've actually written a couple of things down it. Talk about the Post Secret. Post Secret is an ongoing community mail art project created by Frank Warren in 2004. Now, I've actually have a little check. In 2009, he had 1 million postcards sent to him, all with people's secrets. People actually write down the secrets, all anonymized, and send them off to him. And within this, people actually mail, and it's all on a homemade postcard. And what he does, he's like, 2009, he had 1 million postcards. God knows how many he's got now, and he keeps them all, and he actually goes around doing talks and things, I guess, whatever. But on the website, Post Secret, he does put a selection of them on for people to actually go through it, and it's updated every Sunday. And can be anything. It can be absolutely anything actually on it. So I've just got a couple of examples actually here. One that I was on Sunday. When I get on Jeopardy, Jeopardy, it's American quiz program, isn't it? So when I get in Jeopardy, I'm inviting my two opponents to join me in a three-way. Doing that. So there's one. You've been on Jeopardy, Ian, haven't you? The other one, I love Sesame Street. I'm 65. Oh, he's been on 3 times. Or 3 times or 3? I'm just getting so confused here. I love Sesame Street. I'm 65. My friend died in a car crash. I'm not sure it was an accident. And so one of the things that also happened as well are suicide posts that people actually put up there. And what I remember one which quite pertaining, one that keeps coming up every now and again. It's an envelope, and somebody sealed the envelope and said inside this sealed envelope is my ripped up suicide note. So obviously they haven't died by suicide, haven't gone down the road. They've actually been able to make that change and actually go, shit, yeah, and they are so much happier for it. Things can actually go really, really well. And so the thing is, what I'm saying, you are not alone. And one beautiful thing I actually saw with this Post Secret, and it just made me think as well, there was a couple, and they've been just talking about it, and this couple, husband and wife, and they take turns reading the secrets out to each other. So one reads one, then the other one reads that, and then it creates that discussion, doing this, so what about this, what about, and do that every Sunday. So the thing is just, again, it's another avenue to show that you're not alone, and there are people there to actually help support you with regarding these things. And finally, just, around the issue of changes, actually trying to make those changes even to yourself. I know a colleague from a while ago, a mental health nurse, I think I actually did talk about this maybe previous, could have been last time, suffered depression, there was this dark veil, but the problem is that they're a mental health nurse who felt like they had these really dark thoughts. And as we know, mental health nurses, they're not meant to have mental health problems. As Matty Kane actually quite rightly said from First Person Contact, could not talk about it. What they actually did was they wrote a list of 10 things that actually make you happier. Do that. You read this whenever they actually felt okay. So I did talk about this, didn't I? So basically, number 1 could be walk the dog. Number 2 could be listen to a song. Whenever we talked about it with her, she wrote a list of 10 things and goes, well, okay, you go through these 10 things. Oh, I've only got to 5. I've never had to go to the full 10 because just getting to 5, yeah, I feel better now. It's having those awareness. So it is, yes, there are people actually that help you make that change as well, and there's people there that actually help support you as well. Okay? Who's next? There's a fight over here between who's next.
Very philosophical there, quoting Kierkegaard and about life lived backwards. I like that, very interesting. So looking at popular culture, immediately I thought when Dean mentioned about the theme of changes, I was thinking straight away, obviously the famous Bowie track, changes, turn and face the strange, which for me, I always struggle with that line, face the strange. What does that mean? And I guess it's that sort of challenges and opportunities. And I agree with what Dean said at the start about that changes can actually be
hard to make, and that there's a comfort in routine and structure, and I get that. I know people, I always like to go to different places. Some people like to go to the same place repeatedly, again because there's a comfort, but I always think you can never go back to the same place. We're on a rock that's traveling 157,000 kilometers an hour, so it's always different and always changing, and it's perspective, isn't it? It's changes can be hard to make, is my experience. And I think the other line is that for me is that the Black Sabbath changes, which Ozzy Osbourne sang, but it was actually about the drummer Bill Ward, and it was about the deteriorating relationship with his wife, and it's I'm going through changes. So sometimes changes are made, sometimes we like to make them, and I think that's the key point. I think it's hard to make changes, and I think why that's the case, and going back to thinking why about facing that strange, is I think that for me we live in a society that it's not just a tough place, but it promotes that extreme individual, that right of the individual. And, I always mention Margaret Thatcher because there's no such thing as society. I always think that's the one thing I always stick on her. There's no such thing as a society, is what she states. And it's that about that extreme individual, about responsibility is your own. It's your own for you to make, and it dominates all aspects of our life. And I think it's no surprise that post lockdown and COVID that you're seeing a massive peak in terms of that mental distress that we're seeing. I mean, I read in the paper today there's been a dispute over the last number of years over the number of deaths, about how they capture that number of deaths with rough sleepers in terms of how that's equated. So it's controversial in terms of just the numbers and actually how they coordinate that. That's as though the issue really is the number of deaths. So what they actually reckon is that today they've actually reckoned for last year 155 people, rough sleepers, died, which they're saying is something like 42% increase from the year that they've got before. Now I get statistics and how they coordinate those, but it's just, you think of those individuals that are those 155 people themselves, the people that they were connected to and known. And it's just, in terms of mental distress that gets people onto the streets, all the things that we're seeing in terms of, this week I've had conversations with people about, their kids and eating disorders and the difficulties, and just to try and make changes in those situations, I think is really, really hard. And it's, with that epidemic we're seeing in terms of that mental distress, it's no surprise we're looking always at the individual. And one thing that we've always pushed in terms of the services is that we are social animals. As human beings, we're social animals, and part of what we're about is about making those connections, about the support that is out there, about our well-being, and who we are is tied in with our relationships with other people. I've been reading something by The Invisible Doctrine by George Monbiot, who's a journalist and writes, and he talks about that often you can tell in terms of a language, and if we're struggling about how we confuse the word social. And he talks about, for example, social distancing. Really what he means is about a physical, geographical distance. Social security, about economic activity. It's how we, social can be confused, I guess. Social media, is about sort of communication. But again, what you've actually seen that is that intensification where one of the reasons I came off Facebook was because I liked all the connections I was making, finding out about people, but then I could feel that there was a resentment building up, because it's almost, there's that comparison, there's a social comparison that I'm having the greatest time, my life's much, and it's that we're measuring those things up, and it just increases resentment. And I was finding that myself in terms of that resentment and almost anger as a result in terms of that. And I think it's to be aware of that. And the key point for me and why this podcast I think is really important is that together we are powerful, alone we're powerless. And I think as individuals we're turned into consumers, and it's difficult then if we're just consumers to influence and make those changes. But as citizens and of people in terms of a collective and a society, we can change things. It shouldn't be that any weakness or sign of weakness is picked on. If we're reliant on other people, it should be other way round. And the key one thing from one of my poem that I actually is my favourite is by John Donne, and it's that for whom the bell tolls. And I'll just quote the first few lines, and it's that whole thing. No man is an island entire of itself. Each is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. And that's the key thing for me, is that we're connected, we're part of something, and it's about that unity, solidarity, empowerment, brotherhood. It's that I think we need. This podcast is part of of getting that message there. Yes, we're individuals, but it's that in terms of we are social animals, and it's recognising, working together, and that's where the money, resources needs to be spent. Sure, sorry.
Cheers, Ian. Picking up on quite a lot what you lads have already said, really. So I just made a few notes, as per usual, a few lines on the way on the train. But just about change can be very difficult. Change can be very scary. Being back in clinical practice, seeing patients regularly again, there's nothing more truer than talking to a patient and getting them, seeing the realisation of that they may need to change their behaviours in order to benefit their physical health. They need to accept the need to change their self-perception in order to help their mental health. But that's a really scary thing to do, because we are all socialised, we all develop to be who we are. So to have to be expected to change who we are is really scary, and I see that in my patients when I'm when we're having a consultation and we're discussing stuff. I suppose there's the perception that Ian was sort of discussing, that change is inevitable. Nothing ever stands still, and the world's constantly turning. And we have two options, really, don't we? We can embrace change, or we can resist change. I think from a mental health perspective, as I think Dean said, change can cause a lot of problems and upset, because routine is very important to perhaps some people who are suffering with mental health conditions. But I also think, speaking generally, if you resist change, then that can lead to resentment and can lead to development of difficulties with your mental health as well. So there's that to consider as well. Sometimes change can be enforced and can be out of the blue. So I suppose what I'm talking about here is the grief process. So if somebody was to suddenly die, and obviously we talk about suicide a lot in the podcast, and obviously Debbie, who's with us today, will be talking about this. But the impact that sudden change can have on somebody, and the effect that'll have on their mental health, needs to be considered. Sometimes change takes bravery and a willingness. Going back to what I was saying about my patients, one particular patient springing to mind that I've seen recently, who I was quite worried about. They're suffering with what I'd consider to be a really severe depression, and they need to reach inside themselves and look really deeply to how they're going to help themselves to get through this. There's addiction issues, there's a really harrowing past involved, and talking to this person recently, it made me realise how hard it is to change so many aspects of your life. And sometimes as a healthcare professional, it's easy to think to yourself, and I've heard people say, "Oh, they just need to pull themselves together," but it's nowhere near as easy as saying that. And as healthcare professionals, we need to be empathetic to the experiences that these people have been through, and the changes they've already had to experience in their life and the upheavals they've already had to experience in their lives. And this patient, I think, sometimes, and the lads will agree, certain patients stick with you, and you kind of almost have a bit of a worry about them. And this patient's going to stick with me, I think. And I just hope that the changes they're trying to make and the input that they're going to get from the health service and the acknowledgement that they need to change comes to fruition, because it's not easy. Like I say, it's scary, it's difficult, and requires bravery. And I think this patient in particular is very brave for accessing services. Change needs to be acknowledged. So life is speeding by. It's difficult to take stock of the world, let alone dealing with constant changes. But sometimes we need to take a step back, and I've had times in my life where changes have been happening all around me. Even recently, taking on a new role, which I'd not ever experienced before. I'd never worked in the environment that I'm now working in, and I just went into that hell for leather, running at it 100 mile an hour, thinking I'll hit the ground running. And I did for a short while, and now I'm finding, and I was talking to my employees today and said, I'm finding that I'm kind of tired all the time, really tired all the time, and I'm needing to take steps back. And she said that's perfectly normal, and that was refreshing from my employer to sort of have that support. She says, you're absolutely brilliant. But I've gone from working at university for 4 years and working as an academic, as a lecturer, going back into practice. It's been a big change over the last few months, and I think sometimes I'm good at perhaps talking to my patients and getting them to understand the changes they're going through, but sometimes it's difficult to acknowledge your own changes and what you're going through. We talked about the importance of learning and education, and I think anything you learn in life, anything you pick up a book and read, you're educating yourself, and that leads to change. It changes you as a person. We're constantly moving forward. We're constantly changing as individuals, and through education and attending that university course, doing that online. We've said in previous podcasts about doing the Zero Suicide Alliance training. That's going to change you as a person, because the next time you're presented with a situation where somebody may be in front of you wanting to take their own life, you're going to know what to do. So that's changing you as a person, and that's come through self-education and self-development, and that's such an important thing when it comes to change. I was going to talk about David Bowie changes as well, and just in the first verse, there's 4 lines that stood out to me, and I think it's kind of looking at change in general, but also I think it's looking very insular at him and the way where he was in his life at that moment in time, and the lyrics. So I turned myself to face me, but I never caught a glimpse how the others must see the faker. I'm much too fast to take the tests. And I think what he's trying to say here is what I was saying before about life is speeding by so quickly, and sometimes we can't acknowledge who we are, or don't want to acknowledge who we are, and it's quite difficult to recognise where we are with the self, So this morning I embarked upon first set of workshops that we're doing at a local school, and if you see anything on social media with regards to an assembly me and Dean did last week. And what we're doing is, within these assemblies and these workshops, we're actually going into the school and trying to enable the kids that are at this school to make that change, to make that positive change in our lives, to acknowledge the importance of mental health awareness, but at the same time not just learning about it, because learning and education is one thing, but then acting upon what we've learned and doing that within our day-to-day lives. That's what I've tried to get across to them today. Mental health awareness isn't about you sitting there for 40 minutes listening to what I've got to say and doing the tasks in the workshop. It's about taking it from this room and treating your mental health the same way as you treat your physical health, and recognising the mental health continuum. And we may have issues with our mental health when we get older, or we might have mental health issues now, but that doesn't mean we're always going to have those problems or those difficulties, because we can address that by acknowledging that we are able to change as human beings. We can we can be whatever we want to be, and I think that's an important message to take as well. Change can sometimes be negative, but it can also invariably be very positive as well. So I think that's... I just, whilst Conleth was talking, I went on to Post Secret and I found a one on there that said, I have an unhealthy fetish for Freeman's catalogues. I'm not sure who sent that one in. Anyway, on that note, I think I'll finish.
That one.
Freeman's.
So what I always love about our little chats is that, you know, we don't really sort of tell each other what we're going to write about, and we do always come up with different angles. It always blows me away, but that was so insightful because, you know, we've looked at change in our own sort of way, and we brought so many different sort of angles in for the theme of change. Just sort of like my final thoughts on this, you know, all of these services that we have continually promoting on the Manhug are usually set up because of change. They acknowledge that change is so important, whether that's becoming a dad for the first time, a change in employment, a change in housing, a change in relationships, a change in your life through bereavement, whatever it is, it's all to do with change. There's so much help out there. So if you are going through any sort of change at the moment and it's new to your life, do the big thing and just reach out, get that support and go and access it, because that's why it's there. So, we're a very short break, and then we're going to be joined by the amazing Debbie Rogers, who is the founder of Sean's Place.
You're listening to the Men's Mental Health Podcast, The Man Hug.
Okay, it's this part of the podcast now where we shine a spotlight on a local service. And we are really thrilled that we are joined by Debbie Rogers, who is the founder of Sean's Place. So, Debbie, welcome to the Man Hug.
Oh, hello, and thank you for having me as well. I'm made up to be here.
Oh, you're a guest that we've wanted for ages, so we're absolutely made up to have you here. So, I suppose that the first thing, before we go into how amazing Sean's Place is, just tell us a little bit about your own history with it, really.
Okay, so Sean's Place opened in January 2020. Sadly, I'd lost my brother Sean in 2019 in the July. He was only like 14 months older than me, so we were super close our whole life. He was just amazing. He had so much joy and so much to live for, but his mental health was so bad at the time that he took his own life that he just couldn't see a way out. He just didn't see any hope for the future, or he couldn't see that life was going to get better for him. His only joy was myself, my children, our family, but we only knew what we knew back then. I didn't have the experience to keep someone safe from suicide, for example. But I always knew if there was somewhere that existed where he could go and be around other guys who felt the same, or just have a bit of positivity in his life, a bit of positive routine, a reason to get out of bed and feel good about himself, his life would have been so different. And even just a few years ago in 2019, it just didn't exist for men. There wasn't nowhere like that. And I remember he was under the early intervention team. So when you have an episode of psychosis, you are given 3 years under the early intervention team, and it's a brilliant support. It's regular contact with professionals, someone constantly checking on you and, you know, looking at a care plan and your medication. But that support was coming to an end, and it was very apparent that Sean's anxiety was increasing around that time, and so was mine, because I was like, well, what now? Like, where do I go? Who's keeping an eye on him? Who's supporting him and us? But that is all that they can offer, because as we know, you know, things have to keep moving in the NHS, and we knew that was a very, very vulnerable time for Sean, and it was during that period that he took his own life. And I do believe if he had somewhere like Sean's Place at that time, things would be completely different. So when he died, I was talking about it on social media, and a lot of people were contacting me saying, you know, my uncle's feeling the same, or, you know, I lost my dad, you know, because the same thing happened, you know, there was nowhere for them to go. So I very quickly knew it weren't just my brother that this was happening to. This was happening all over the place, and people were so lost and so frightened for the loved ones. So I decided to build somewhere in Sean's memory called Sean's Place, and we thought it might just be like a thing on a Saturday, because I was working full time at the time. So I thought, oh, someone will just come in and have a cup of tea, we can get some lads together and have a chat. And here we are 4 years later. We're supporting about 350 men a week. We open 5 days a week, 12 hours a day, and we're offering a whole variety of support, all in Sean's, you know, memory and his legacy, really.
Wow, it's incredible, you know. The whole theme that we've decided for this podcast there was about changes, and obviously for yourself, that's a significant change of losing someone that you're so close to. How did you sort of deal with that yourself before taking on this mammoth task of creating Sean's Place?
I think Sean's Place probably saved me, to be fair. When Sean died, I'd never experienced pain like it, or loss or grief, and you know, I've been through a lot in my life, and this was by far the worst thing that has ever happened to me. But I think some people don't realise when you lose someone to suicide, there's an inquest, and because he was under the care of the NHS at the time, there was also an internal investigation, and there was missed opportunities into his care. There was failings. I wasn't being listened to. I was banging the door, screaming for help, just begging someone to listen to me, and everywhere I turned, the door was closed. It was like they just accepted that this was inevitable, and I knew it wasn't. He could have been saved, but so we ended up having an Article 2 inquest, which is more in depth. More people are accountable. More people are called as witnesses. But I had to turn into a barrister overnight and learn all of this legal jargon and language for it to happen. And this absolute life angel who I met, she is a barrister who specialises in inquests, and she says, I'm going to help you pro bono. She said that you need support with this, and she supported me the whole way. So whilst all that awful dark stuff was going on, investigations, inquests, grief, funerals, everything else, my family, I knew there had to be something positive that come from this. Otherwise, it was a very, very dark path that I was going to go down. And statistics show that when people lose a loved one to suicide, there's a very high risk that they go on to take their own lives. And I can actually believe that because it's a very dark road that you go down afterwards. So by creating Sean's Place, it was going to be something positive for my children, to remember the uncle by, to remember my brother by as well. Life wasn't always doom and gloom. You know, we used to call him Mr. Bean because he was just that crazy character that I'd have my kids swinging off the lampshades at tea time and stuff. So I wanted something positive to come from this, and for me, that had to be the change. You know, Sean's life couldn't just be this. That couldn't be the end. There had to be more from it, and I knew there was people out there like Sean who still had a chance of living a really good, happy life despite mental health challenges. You can still live a normal, happy life with the right support at the right time. That was missing in Sean's case, but I wanted to make sure that didn't happen to anybody else.
Amazing. It's such an incredible story of especially to do with, you know, yourself, the impact it's had on you, and it's changed your life. How did you sort of like find, you know, going from one sort of life to all of a sudden I'm now in a mental health world and I'm having to help people and learn all how to run an organisation such as this? Yeah, I think grief does change you as a person. Life's never the same when you lose somebody that you're so close to, particularly to suicide, or, you know, in any traumatic event. You do change as a person. There's a lot of imposter syndrome. Some days I pinch myself and think, what do I know? You know, my background is school administrator, my degrees in, HR. It's so far removed from this world. All I have is my lived experience. But I surround myself with amazing people who are skilled, are experienced. You know, they know this field. They've probably got lived experience themselves. And I've learned a lot along the way. We've evolved. We listen to the guys who come through the door. That's first and foremost where all of our sort of evolution of Sean's Place has come from. It's from the guys coming through the door, sharing their stories, finding what's missing in their lives and doing something practical about it. I'm so lucky this is my job now. Like, it's my life, and, you know, I get to go into work every day and be inspired by amazing people, and I've got an amazing team around me. You know, I get to, you know, just make a positive impact on people's lives, and I get to say that this is in memory of my brother. Not everybody gets to say that when they lose somebody. Like, some people just spiral, whereas, you know, I've got this amazing legacy for my brother, and I feel very blessed. Yeah, it's incredible. And on past sort of like man hugs, we've had people who, like Alfie Fitzsimmons from Alfie's Squad,
amazing,
you know, a young person that's set up something in memory of his father, and we've had James's Place, and all of these places are across the Liverpool City region. They're being created by people because there's a need for it, and I guess really, isn't it? You know, because they've experienced something so harrowing, and now they want to do something about it, like yourself. You know, we're always just blown away, aren't we, by the amount of amazing people that there are in the city that do things like this. Now Sean's Place in particular, you know, we've had lots of men's groups and men's clubs on here, but it kind of stands out for me in terms of the things that you guys do, you know, from Spanish lessons to choirs to fishing. It's like there's literally something for everyone, isn't there? So just tell us a little bit about that then.
Yeah, I think when we first opened Sean's Place, I did like a survey online with all the things that Sean, I just knew he loved, like his art and, you know, like just being with people. Cups of tea, we have endless cups of tea and free coffee at Sean's Place because that's what Sean loved, and that will never ever change. But naturally it evolves. As I say, we listen to the guys who come through the door, and we hold things called steering groups. So we open the doors to the lads and say, come in, tell us what you love, tell us what's not working, tell us what you'd like to try. And everything that we do, there's no hierarchy with what we do. So the suicide prevention stuff we do saves lives, but equally so does the social stuff. Like somebody coming into a fitness class or a cookery class, or, you know, to have a cup of tea on a Friday night, that could equally save their lives as a course of counselling could, because it's that routine, it's having friends and, you know, a purpose and feeling that sense of belonging. So we could literally ask the guys to do anything, and they'd pretty much do it, because it's not about necessarily what you're doing, it's who you're doing it with, and, you know, that feeling that you get, you feel better leaving than you did when you come in. And we are guided by them, so a lot of the things we do is because they've been asked for. So a new language was something that was, like the Spanish was something that they really wanted, and it's that new skill. I think as adults, unless we're in the education world, we're not very good at learning new things. We want to, but it's that confidence to try something new. You know, we lose that sort of playfulness in our lives, don't we, when we grow older? But a lot of them wanted to learn this new skill. It's a form of mindfulness, you know, you're in the moment. It's a sense of achievement and pride when you learn something. So yeah, we do stuff like that. We do fitness classes, fishing. I always downplay it because I forget about everything. There's so much.
You do so much,
But our most popular things are the Coffee and Connect on a Monday morning and a Friday night. And it's literally, we put on tea and coffee, biscuits, and a room. So we've got a big, like, lounge area where usually all the grumpy old men sit and talk about politics and BBC and all the rest of it. And then we've got the games room, which it flows into, and they can have a game of pool, they can play on the computer, they can play darts, and then that flows into the hall. Then it's like a big, massive space. And then we have a group of guys who come in. They're so lovely. They're only young lads, but you'd think they'd be into the football and the game, and they're not. They sit down and play like Monopoly and Cluedo and stuff like that. Like, it's board games, and it's just finding what's right for them and their thing, really. And that's not, and it costs nothing to have a cup of tea and, you know, get a few people in the room, and it works, especially on a Friday night. That's the night when we'd usually go to the pub, or, you know, we'd go out, and if the pub's an issue for you, or you don't have someone to go with, what do you do? Where do you go? And then the other popular thing is the yoga. Honestly, like, when we first started doing yoga, we were like, no one's going to come to this, and it's the most popular thing. It helps that our yoga teacher's absolutely amazing.
Just these old boys who were talking politics, they're wearing leotards, doing yoga, just flashing through me mind.
Do you know what? Like, we have, like, guys who were, like, in the 70s doing headstands, like, you know, they're trying to get into the splits, and it's all about, obviously you feel safe doing it because you're in a room where everyone's doing it, you feel comfortable because you're in Sean's Place, you know the staff. It's not like you're doing it in the pub with the lads and they're going to take the mickey out of you. And but the benefits, like, it's increasing the flexibility, it's reducing the pain. We've got people who, you know, this one guy who sadly made a serious attempt on his life a couple of years ago, and that affected his mobility quite seriously. And since he's been doing the yoga, like, he could barely walk when he come to us, like, 3 years on. I have to chase him down the road now. Like, he's like Mo Farah, he's running. And it's all come from, you know, coming to these sessions and, you know, working on himself and stuff. And it's all the little things that you take for granted that these people are getting out of, you know, what we're doing there.
It's amazing. You've hit on a common theme that always comes up in the Man Hug. It's not really about the activity, it's about the extra things that the activity brings, like friendships, being with people that have experienced what you've experienced, and building networks and support. They're just so invaluable, aren't these? But it's amazing to hear that you offer so much, because that can be the thing that often brings people into the door, isn't it? You know, it can be oh, well, that's a past interest of mine, or that's something I want to do again.
And a lot of guys are really resistant to it at first. We get loads who, we'll do the welcome call after we've received the referral form, and they're like, don't even speak to me about the social stuff. You're not getting me in a yoga class. I just want counselling. I'm like, okay. And then they come in, they have the counselling, and you see them walking down the corridor going, okay, what's going on in there? And then the next minute they're walking down the corridor with all the new yoga mates. So I think quite often it is just getting them through the door, making them feel safe, knowing that there's no judgment. And once they're in, they're like, I didn't realise it was going to be like this. I think people have a perception of what mental health services and, particularly places like Sean's place are going to be like. And that's so scary. Like, we know it's difficult for them to walk through the door for the first time, but when they do, they stay because they love it, which is amazing.
How do people get involved, and do they have to be referred, or can they present? If someone's listening and they want to attend, what's the process for that?
So we do ask for the referral form, which they can do themselves. They can make a self-referral. I think something like 80% of our referrals are self-referrals. The GP can refer them, A&E and places like that often refer to us as well. But that referral form just makes us sort of like assess that this is the right place for them. There's something there that we can help that person with, because the last thing we'd want to do is say to someone, come to Sean's place, we'll show you all the stuff we've got, but actually it's not going to make the blindest bit of difference to your life, because you need a house first, or we need to get you help with your alcohol addiction. We don't want to give people sort of false hope. So that referral form just helps us to keep that person safe. Then we'll do a welcome call with them, which happens within 24 hours of receiving the referral form, and we design like a bit of a bespoke package of support for them then, based around what's going on for them in their life, what they need, what they're looking for, and that's different for everybody. It's completely tailored, it's completely person-centred. If it's therapies that they need, quite often they need interventions from our suicide prevention officer, or they might need counselling or a bereavement group. They'll be offered a face-to-face consultation, again just to make sure it's safe, that it's not conflicting with any other support they've got in place at the time. And if it's social support, they can access that as soon as they've had the welcome call, so they can make a referral and be in a cookery class on the Friday if that's what they want.
Amazing. How much are you sort of seeing, people, as you said before, maybe reluctant to come, and then they start to engage? How much are you seeing it's changing their lives?
Oh God, all the time. We have guys who tell us it's took 4 weeks for them to get to us. They've drove around the block, they've got outside the gate and then they've bottled it and drove off, because it's massive, especially for men to walk into a room full of 30 guys that you don't know is absolutely terrifying. Like, I got a gym membership in January and don't think I went till June. I wanted to, and I had every single day to go, but actually getting there, because I thought I might die in the room. I thought, God, if I do this fitness class, I'm literally not going to come out alive. And I went, and it weren't that bad, and I went back. But we don't underestimate how difficult it is for people. But our referrals have absolutely increased now. We get about 40 referrals a week from people reaching out to us for support, and I think throughout the last couple of years particularly, it's more normal now for people to do things like this. It's more accepted. Men aren't sort of scared of talking anymore. We're definitely getting there in terms of breaking that stigma, and celebrities are helping with things like that. We've got Paddy the Baddy and stuff like that who are speaking very publicly about their struggles, and it's almost given particularly the younger generation permission to like say, okay, he's talking about it, I can talk about it. When we first opened, for a good 2 years, we probably had 1 or 2 people who were under the age of 25 with us. Found it very difficult to engage young people. And then In Demand Radio kindly give us an advertisement on their radio show for free. It was fantastic. It was like this. We got to record like the tunes, the melodies, the voiceovers, everything. And since then, because In Demand Radio was like a cool radio station, Lee Butler's on there, all these really amazing cool DJs, it almost like said to people, okay, it's cool to reach out then to Sean's place because they're on In Demand Radio. And then since then, our younger people are coming through thick and fast, which is great.
That's amazing. And you mentioned before, about sort of working closely with other services and organisations. How sort of instrumental has that been in helping you to set it up? Learning from other people and sharing knowledge. Yeah. And now, if it's not for them, signposting into the right service.
Massively. Like, we're so much better now that there's so many more places that exist, which is amazing. Like, I know you mentioned James's place. We work so well with them because what they do is different to us, but we complement each other's services. So they're a crisis intervention, and so we can almost like step people up to them, and they can, you know, when people have completed their intervention, they can refer them back to us. That works very, very well. We understand each other's services really well, and it's that safety net, isn't it? Because it's not for everybody. No one service can possibly say that they are the right thing for every single person, and it's about people having choices. And we know that if somewhere isn't for us, we can signpost at Andy's Men Club, you know, Reach Men's Centre, you know, I know you've got First Person Project over the other side of Liverpool and stuff like this. It's given people those choices, because we can only do so much. They might not want our bereavement group on a Wednesday night, for example, but they know that, I know Andy's Man Club opens on a Monday, but we know that they're open on a Monday night, so we could signpost to them if what we're offering isn't for them. And I think we should do that. I think it's wrong if we don't, because we don't own that person. Ultimately, we want the best for them. We want them to thrive, and we can only do that by sharing, you know, what's out there and giving that information to them.
That's brilliant. And a lot of the organisations you mentioned there, you know, we've had them on the podcast.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of the things that we keeps coming up on the podcast is the importance of working together and being able to build a solid, stronger, bigger support network.
And you could have 50 Sean's places and it wouldn't be enough. Like, there's enough people out there, do you know what I mean, that need help. So if we've got that tool that we know that somewhere's open at this time and they offer this service, we've got a duty to tell that person about that, and if we don't, we're doing them a disservice.
Yeah, it's incredible. How sort of important do you find it to you know, use Sean's legacy as well, you know, for people that attend and to carry on promoting, you know, all of the positive attributes of your own brother?
Yeah, I think it's very important. Like, as soon as and you're more than welcome to all come and visit Sean's place, by the way.
Free tea and coffee.
Yeah, and biscuits. Yeah, exactly. You'll move in. There's a shower and everything.
I'm a keen fisherman. You can get in the choir.
When you walk into Sean's place, we have a picture of Sean, you know, on a table as you walk in, because we think it's important for people to know that this isn't, you know, just something that we decided we were going to do. This has come from losing somebody, and we don't want that to happen to anyone else. And I think when the guys particularly hear about Sean, they feel safe there. Like, it's almost like they feel relaxed, like, oh, okay, so you get it, you know, you all get it because you've been there, and you don't want that to happen to us. I think it's important for people's expectations of us as well, because we've been around 4 years now. People do start to see it as like a statutory service, like you should be performing this way, and you know, you must have funding because you're so big and you've been around. And we don't, like, you know, we're just a small community organisation just doing a lot of good work, but we still need that support ourselves. We still need people to, you know, give us a chance and support us to continue doing that. And I found that to be the case over the last year in particular. You know, when people are looking for fundraisers to do, they might have support you in year 1 and 2 because they were rooting for you, but now you're established, they're like, well, you don't need it now, we'll go somewhere else. It's like, no, we still need it. Like, we desperately need it. So I think by sharing Sean's story, it just puts that reminder into people's minds that, you know, we're not a clinical service, we're not a statutory service, you know, we're just someone who lost a sister with an amazing team, just trying to do a great job.
Sadly, you've mentioned the F word, the funding word, which sadly comes up a lot. I mean, it's so important, isn't it? And we sadly have to emphasise this all of the time. You know, it's you won't be able to open your doors unless you have the right funds there. So, what sort of things do you have, you know, to help you with this? You know, people who are doing fundraising and regular events and things. How can people get involved if they want it?
Yeah, so our income streams, I've had to make sure that we treat Sean's place like a business and have, like, be diverse. If we rely solely on grant funding, then we'll close very quickly because grant funding is so scarce at the moment. But saying that, we are supported by some amazing funders such as Steve Morgan Foundation, the National Lottery and stuff. We have people who are amazing and run marathons, and we've got someone doing a marathon at the weekend in York, so we're going to do a little road trip and support them. We had someone just do a golf day recently as well, which was fab. And we've got a winter ball coming up in a couple of weeks in the Titanic. It's been like 6 months of sheer hard work, but we've got to start working and really grafting to bring that money in, because any of our funding is only like a year, 2 years, and we can't get excited about opening more Sean's places because the one that we have now isn't secure for anywhere past 2 years. We've got staff who, this is their livelihood now, and we've got heating and lucky bills that are going up, and you know, everyone's facing the same challenges. but it just puts pressure on me to make sure that I'm working doubly hard, connecting with the community, doing things like this to share our story, so that people do look at us and, you know, want to get involved and support us, really.
That's say if anyone is listening and they want to do any sort of fundraising, then get in touch with Sean's Place, because it's such a valuable and important thing. You know, how many men did you say a week? 350
yeah.
men? You know, that's an absolutely incredible figure, isn't it? You know, it's a lot of cups of tea, it's a lot of coffee.
It's a lot of cups of tea. And you know what? We used to make the cups of tea for them. But we don't anymore, because we've got loads of complaints about my tea making skills. So we just set it up now and they help themselves, which is amazing. Yeah.
So the final big sort of push then. So if anyone wants to go and find out about Sean's Place, what's the website? Where did he go and look and find out?
So we've got social media channels on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn as well. So if you just search Sean's Place, it'll come up as the one with the teal feather.
Yeah.
And then our website is seansplace.org.uk.
Yeah, brilliant. So seansplace.org.uk. Make sure that you tap into that. Debbie, we can't thank you enough. What you do and the guys at Sean's Place is absolutely incredible. It's everything that the Manhug is set up to do, is to promote these places where people can go for help and support, and what you're doing is just incredible. So we can't thank you enough.
Thanks. You very much.
And thank you so much for joining us. Please make sure that you follow us on Twitter. It's @themanhug. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next month.
If you or anybody else you know is struggling with their mental health, visit hubofhope.co.uk or download the app today and find local and national mental health support.